At AQA, we work with the UK's largest teacher network to shape the future of assessment. With teachers for students, we ask questions today that matter tomorrow.
Teachers, have you heard of Bet UK 2026? It's the world's biggest education and technology event, and it's completely free for educators. From keynote speakers and panel sessions to CPD accredited workshops and networking, Bet UK 2026 is where educators from across the globe come together to share ideas, spark inspiration, and find solutions that fuel our mission to drive better education globally. Get your free ticket today at betshow.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to our late show. Tonight we're going to be trying to think about that always fascinating question of SEND. We all know that this is a big issue on everyone's lips at the moment. We know SEND levels are rising, and we're going to put that together with everyone's favourite evidence-informed approach. And are the two of those compatible? So, do you want to give us a starting perspective, Beejesh?
Yeah, I might start with a question.
Go for it.
Are overlays a thing in your school?
Well, if I tell you that before I arrived, a very large pack of overlays was purchased, and it's still in our reception. Now, that isn't because I've consciously said anything, but I find it interesting that it's still there. So I think someone in the school must believe that they are of value, but it's not something that is common practice currently.
Yeah, so this is how I ended up thinking about this little idea here. Because like overlays are still a thing they've been a thing in a couple of schools that I've worked in over the past, and I hear a lot of colleagues who work in other schools tell me that overlays are still a thing, and even to the point where I hear family members talk about using overlays because of their needs, and I was just it just kind of I started to think about it, right, and I started to do some research into it, being the nerd that I am, right?
Absolutely.
and a bizarre kind of came out of the woodwork of all this research, which is that the NHS don't recognise ERLMs as a condition, or nor do I can never pronounce it, nor do like the Royal Society of Ophthalmologists either. And actually, there's no. When I started to dig a bit deeper, I was like, there's no evidence that these overlays work. And yet I know in schools across the country, there are large numbers of inclusion profiles, which include the use of an overlay, which is a really, really interesting phenomenon, isn't it? Because obviously being me, I like to do everything from an evidence-informed perspective, right? I like to make sure that my teaching practice is evidence-informed. I like to try and utilize the best strategy when it comes to what works in a number of places, and what works when it comes to the cognitive science behind learning, etc. And then I just thought about the use of these overlays, and I was like, that's really interesting, isn't it? And obviously, being the cold-hearted scientist I am, my initial gut instinct was we should get rid of them.
So I actually, as you've been speaking, it's been making me think, because at the last school I worked at, we didn't have overlays, but we did have a large cupboard with many colours of paper. And there were things that were photocopied onto different colour paper. And whilst I don't particularly think that different colour overlays are vital, I do think that the black-white contrast can be really hard for some children. And if you think about when we're making presentations and things, and I don't know if this is something that's in secondary or your practice at all, I always do avoid black text on white backgrounds for presentations. And I think it genuinely is because I find it harder to read than off a pale colour. I just think there's something about the way it's written, and it might be because I'm dyslexic, and it might not be. That might be totally irrelevant. But
Yeah.
I do think there's possibly something in there, but that would be for all, not for particular people with a particular learning challenge or send. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I got you. So this is really interesting. When you start to scratch a little bit deeper underneath it, and you start to look at the evidence, like I love the fact that you talked about like different coloured papers, right?
Mm.
Plural. Uh, and I have, I do have heard about in some certain schools where there is a colour match to the child when it comes to an inclusion profile, and I looked at the evidence, and it was like in a lot of cases there's very very spurious evidence that link color matching to the child. In fact, but then if you look even more, there's actually a company that does it that
Oh,
matches
really?
the paper color to your heirlooms, right? And they charge
Yeah.
obviously for the diagnosis, etc. And I was like, this is really super interesting. But this practice has come around in schools. As I'm like, this is super interesting. However, right, like I said, I approached it from a cold-hearted scientist approach. Like, well, this is resource
Mm.
cost, isn't it? And obviously, like maybe opportunity cost if you don't happen to have that specific color available on that day when that child walks in. Oh my God! And I guess that's an inclusion thing, right? Right. However, like when you start to dig underneath it, you realize that actually, when you look into the research, some kids just reported that they because it was really hard to measure. There was no measurable impact
Yeah.
on learning. Let's just put that to bed straight away. Like there is no study that has found that certain kids learn better when they use a different color of paper, right? There is nothing. There's no evidence out there on that. However, some kids do report that they feel they learn better, and some kids report they have better accessibility when it comes to like their subjective kind of approach to it all. And then I was like, oh, hold on. And there are just some kids who are like, yeah, that color's rubbish for me, sir. And then you give them something else, and they'll just happily work away. And I was like, oh, so so is it really? Do you know what I mean? Like all of my gut is going, all of my kind of natural way of working. Well, let's call it a natural
Yeah.
way of working, is thinking, oh my God, this is just we this is folly. This is just so anecdotal, and we shouldn't really be wasting our time with it. And we shouldn't even be entertaining kids' notion that they learn better on a different color paper. And then when you've got a child in front of you and they're sitting working away because you've given them a different color paper, I'm like, well, is it possible to be evidence informed when it comes to send? Because that, do you know what
And
I
I
mean?
guess
Like
that it almost becomes
in
does it matter at that point? If the
yeah,
difference for a
exactly.
child, even if it's psychological, is that by giving me this resource, I feel more confident to approach the task, is that a reasonable adjustment, even if there's no evidence behind it? I, I guess the non-card-hearted scientist in me would go, it's probably worth it. I think there's lots of things I do in my life that sometimes I think, mm, but if it helps that child in that moment to do that thing in that way, and it means they're focused and learning and engaged, I might just do it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I
Where you heading?
what I wanted to talk
Mm.
about. Like, but then I guess the questions we raise is what happens when like where does it become
Mm.
wasteful or harmful in some way? Like, so for example, let's take the other one. Like, so there's quite a few of these things actually. Like, I think dyslexia is quite an interesting condition. There's a lot of kind of non-evidence informed strategy when it comes to dyslexia, and like sometimes are we quick to so for example like with dyslexia, right, we quite confuse dyslexia with this thing that people call Erlams, and does Erlams actually exist, etc., etc., etc. But then maybe we aren't as hot on some of the more the less sexy stuff and the less easy to fix stuff if suddenly we keep our focus on something like colored overlays or colored paper. And like look, I'm speaking with quite a lot of caution here because like I don't suffer from send. I don't have any send. Like, I don't suffer from anything. No, I don't suffer from send. That's rubbish. Like I don't have
Do you
a.
not have a
I don't have a. Do you
specific
know what I mean?
diagnosis,
I
a
don't,
special
yeah,
educational need? Yeah,
yeah. I don't have a
yeah.
diagnosed need, right? Do you know what I mean? And who says that? Sorry, I should apologize for saying that. Like no one suffers from send. They just have some people just have a need, and we meet it, and then they just move on with their lives, right? And like essentially, I don't have any of those needs, so I don't want to poo-poo this.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean? I want to talk quite sensitively
mm.
about this, and sometimes being a scientist and being kind of quite quick to speak. I'm on TTR, right? I do realize that we can get into some offensive territory here, and I don't want to offend anyone, right? But it's an interesting one. Do you know what I mean? I think at the core of what I like to do is support send needs as best as possible. Do you know that's it? Like make sure that there's just like no barrier to these drop all the curbs and make sure that we can freewheel through the curriculum and through learning and be like as successful as possible when it comes to whoever you are when you come into the place where I work. But I do worry that if we're looking in the wrong direction, we might drop some curbs, spend effort dropping curbs that don't need dropping, and forget about other curbs that do. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And I worry about that. That's kind of a bit of concern in my perspective on it. And so, should we be looking at always though, always like for example, like Dylan Williams says it right, that everything works somewhere. Um, and like it's just sometimes you have to drop good things for less good things for good things, right? For
Yeah.
better things, and that's an interesting one. Do you know what I mean? And maybe like a coloured overlay is a great kind of comfort blanket for some. But then if we don't never go beyond that into maybe phonological awareness or like extra synthetic phonics for kids with dyslexia, or if we never go for like task structures for kids with ADHD and we just think about fidget spinners because they're easy, or timeout breaks and stuff like that, then maybe we won't, like maybe we aren't supporting these
And
kids
it's
as well
interesting
as we
because
possibly
I
could.
mean, it also makes me think about almost, and again, we have to be a bit sensitive, don't we? But there's a bit of learned helplessness here. If a child believes that they need an overlay to be able to be successful, and then they find themselves in a situation without it, do they then almost put a kind of limitation on their own ability to complete the task, right? Like, do they become so reliant on something that may or may
Mm.
not actually have any evidence behind it that actually limits them in the future in some way? Let me jump in
Yeah,
the adverts and then
that's
we'll come
really
back
good.
to this
Yeah,
if that's all right, because I know what
yeah,
we're like. We'll get carried away.
yeah.
So um first one is Hachette Learning. The show is brought to in partnership with Hachette Learning, producers and publishers of personal development books, lots of superb resources for great teaching and learning in schools. So, opportunity to level up your professional development. Their website is hachetlearning.com, HACHETTE learning.com, full range of titles. Chalk and Talk podcast. If you're looking for a great educational podcast, Chalk and Talk is with Anna Stoke, a passionate advocate for evidence based, your favourite, maths education
Yeah,
for students. Talks about effective teaching methods, how to teach maths facts, evaluating research shows claims, and lots of top notch guests from researchers, educators, policymakers. So, anyone interested in education, get from wherever you get your podcasts. That's Chalk and Talk. And the last one is AQA. AQA knows teachers are the real experts in the classroom. So they work with teachers like you, combining your insights with their assessment expertise, trying to make resources, guidance that genuinely makes a difference. AQA are the UK's most chosen assessment organisation, so chances are you've heard of them. And they, as we enter this new year, are focused on helping teachers feeling supported and ready. So head to their website or search AQA. We work with experts. Right. So
great. Right,
evidence
go on.
send. And I think actually, when I was thinking about tonight, one of the things I was thinking about was the double disadvantage. Have you read about this? The
Yes.
latest reports talking about, are those children who are in receipt of pupil premium, who we already know who are disadvantaged, and who are SEND, doubly disadvantaged? Because we probably all know that children with SEND often need a really strong advocate, someone in their corner, to fight for them. And it shouldn't be that they have to
Mm.
fight, but sadly, the world and the system that we live in so often does. And what difference that makes. And I think my initial response was, A, it's a bit gutting, if I'm honest, that we've got such a postcode lottery, which is then defined by where you live in terms of how affluent that area is, how good the SEND support is, what schools are able to offer in those situations. Um, but also, when we're thinking about how do we respond to that, because that basically means in areas of high deprivation, you are going to get high levels of send, and not just high level of sends, but this kind of double impact of high levels of send in an area of deprivation, and how it matters even more then perhaps to get your strategies right, to get the evidence informed strategies right for the children that you've got sat in front of you, and what your thoughts are on that, I guess.
Yeah, this is why I do it, right? Like this is why I do what I do. It's because I truly believe that education pulls people up out of those kind of out of where they're at and gives them a new lease. Do you
Mm,
know what I mean? Moving forward, and it just makes me really sad that there's like that double kind of cost that's paid by people who are living who are unfortunate enough to be in that position, and and so like realistically we should do everything we can when it comes to like the practices that are correct, and quite often those practices aren't expensive, like, or as expensive as you think. Do you know, like when you look at like something like
mm,
ADHD or
mm,
autism, and look at the guidance on how to support those learners. That's just like often a lot of it is incorporated in superb teaching,
mm.
isn't it? Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And really rooted evidence informed practice. So like, well, amazing thing. Yeah, I was reading the guidance on autism, like explicit instruction with dual coding, so that a child can look at the pictures and kind of and glean understanding from that if they've got like kind of language issues, which like which have developed as a result of their condition. Really interesting, right? Now dual coding is obviously a mainstay of evidence-based teaching.
Mhm,
Do you know what I mean? It's not just drawing pictures, it's diagrammatically representing things so that kids don't have the cognitive load of processing language as well as concept.
mhm,
Do you know what I mean? And it's just a mainstay. It's a mainstay. Classrooms which have got really kind of defined boundaries for kids with ADHD, so they know publicly that what the consequences are for the behaviour. And they know what is going to happen, and those routines, the routines in a classroom, which stay the same per lesson to support kids with ASD. Like it's quite an interesting one. Like there's like tons of strategy. I think it's cheap. It's cheap, and it's doable. The only problem is it's hard to do consistently across the school. And so I think sometimes it's easy to look at the window dressing of things like interventions using overlays, and interventions using fidget spinners, or even the timeout pass. Do you know, like and I think that's an interesting one as well,
yeah.
isn't it? Like like it's just like it's easy to focus on that window dressing, because that is something that you can produce for that child within minutes. It doesn't require the training of maybe 150
Mhm,
colleagues. You know what
mhm,
I mean? Like you give that child an overlay and go, yeah, you've got Earlham's, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? Oh, it's like I don't know where you've got this diagnosis from, but like what we're gonna do is do some internal screening, and we're gonna flip through different paper, and you say which ones you can read from and which ones you can't, and then we'll just give you that paper, and oh yeah, there we go. Okay, now we'll put that in the inclusion profile, and happy days, off you go. Whereas actually training people how to do task planning and how to work with their children to do task planning, it is a feat, isn't
mm,
it? I suppose it's easier when it comes to maybe primary, and you've got like one teacher teaching that one child all day. and maybe they can navigate a little bit easier when it comes to that practice. But also, but then in secondary it becomes really difficult, because then that child might go to, do you know what I mean, that you have to train all the colleagues in their timetable, and that becomes more of a difficulty.
Yeah, and I probably forget a little bit that. Yeah, so I mean, I've seen it in action, right? Because my son's just gone to secondary, so he's gone from knowing one person who knows him really well and getting that right to having to get to know lots of different teachers and the balance of that and what that looks like. Um, but actually, there's also some benefits there, right? Because he gets on really well with some of them, and they get to know him really well, and actually possibly better than some of his primary school teachers did, right? Because you
Yeah,
almost get a reset every lesson, whereas sometimes if things have been tricky and you're with that person all day, it it
yeah,
can be hard. But I think you're absolutely right,
yeah,
because my kind of go to in terms of right, where do we start this conversation was right. Well, there's fairly recent changes and new recommendations from the EF, right? So if we're thinking about
yes,
research based, and the third one is all pupils having access to high quality teaching for special education needs in mainstream schools. So are we
yeah,
making sure that when thinking about pupils with SEND, there is flexible grouping, cognitive and metacognition strategies, explicit instruction, technology to support SEND, scaffolding? Like none of those things, and it even says above it, searching for a magic bullet can distract teachers from the powerful strategies they often already possess, right? And is the overlays someone's attempt to magic bullet it? I just do this and then they'll be able to cope with everything, rather than going, okay, for different children, there's going to be different needs. So different children are going to need things done in a different way potentially, but actually for the vast majority of pupils, if we get it right for SEND, we get it right for all. So if we get those cognitive and
yeah,
metacognition strategies right, if we get that explicit instruction, if we scaffold this, then all children will be able to be successful. Now, so I've got a child who I can think of who might have hearing needs or visual needs, and actually having some technology that, whether that's a hearing aid or a screen that's larger and in front of them, that enables them to access things differently or in a way that means it's more accessible for them, that's different to me than the overlay, because that is a kind of medical condition
mm,
that has gone right. We recognise that that is a recognised thing, a thing, that's the wrong word, isn't it? A recognised need that we can solve to provide them with a solution. But even with things like other physical things like stammering, having a language rich environment for all is going to help them, not just making sure they've got lots of speech and language in place. So,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
kind of both, isn't there, in that evidence? There's the, yes, they might need something additional or another, but also we can really help them by getting the provision for all right.
Yeah, but there's the actual true dropping of the curve there, isn't there? Like there's the kind of, do you know what I mean? Like where we've got a physical need, we can
Yeah.
change physical things in the environment with the use of tech and etc. And you're stupid not to
Yes.
do that. That is just, I'm sorry, like, but you are like, if you haven't done that, then you're mad not to do that, because like that is just such an easy fix. Getting some visual aids or getting some hearing aids, like even things like changing the line
Mm.
spacing on your PowerPoints. Like suddenly, like you've dropped the curve massively for everyone, and like everyone can access the space, and everyone. Do you know what I mean? Like that's a physical needs. Like if someone can't see, they need to sit at the
Yeah.
front, right? And it's just that, and that's not that is for that person. I mean, like it's not a magical bullet. Like it's not magic, but if that's all they have, that is the magic bullet. If that's the only issue, that is like stopping them from accessing curriculum, then that is a magic bullet for that child. So that's the flip side of the coin. Do you know what I mean? We've got to be weary, because we can throw the baby out. And this is what I was thinking, and it's not often I kind of veer away from the evidence. But if we just always, we can go two ways. We can go, oh, it's just good teaching, isn't it? Well, it's multiple ways, isn't it? Really, we should have a nuanced approach. But we could end up going down the, yep, it's just good teaching. So let's all focus on these good teaching strategies, and then ignore some of the kids who have those magic bullet solutions. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And like we go, oh no, we completely missed that. That person just needs to be sat at the front, and we go after all of the other strategies. And then there's the other side of it, which is trying to find magic bullets for all, instead of going for maybe more complex solutions. Like, for example, like with dyslexia, like maybe a one-to-one literary solution is expensive, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like, but there's loads of evidence for the fact that a one-to-one literacy solution focused on phonological awareness and processing can improve like literacy, can improve like the conditions for someone who has got dyslexia. Because dyslexia is a multitude of conditions, and so some of that individualized attention can really benefit them. But the minute we say that, like there's a time and monetary cost associated with it, and let's face it, there's not enough money for send at the moment.
Yeah, and I think there's the high quality teaching might reduce the need for that support, but some pupils are still going to require a targeted intervention to make that progress. So it's that
Mm,
recognizing what is universal and what's specialist, I guess, in terms of and how we target that, how we get that right, how we make sure that they are effective, and sometimes that they're not creating a barrier, sorry, to inclusion. That actually they're not knocking a child's confidence. They're not making a difference if a child is then missing out on other things that they really enjoy, because that's sometimes
yeah,
the fear and the worry that certainly in primary is, oh yeah, let's give that child some extra support with their literacy. Oh yeah, no, that means they can't do PE. But that child loves PE. And
yeah,
actually that's the bit of
yeah,
their day or their week that they absolutely look forward to. So just being a little bit sensitive, I guess, into there is only so much time, there is only so much we can do, and finding ways to work around that flexibly, which is harder. Right? I mean, it is,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but probably worth
And
it.
and you want to do you like think about it. We've now got like a literacy intervention or a phonological awareness intervention that really helps that child to access all of the curriculum. But we take away their inclusion in terms of the whole space by streaming them into a different curriculum. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? And so there's like this whole kind of this this almost like a trolley problem involved
yeah,
here. like and that's why I think sometimes we'll lean towards some of the more like fuzzy magic bullet solutions. And by the time they come to us in secondary, Claire, I'm not gonna lie to you, some of these like magic bullet solutions have ingrained themselves in. It's a self-fulfilling
yeah,
prophecy. Do you know what I mean? I can't read on anything apart from this specific shade of blue paper. So therefore, I cannot access the entire curriculum. I've had kids say that, like, "Get me a blue book, sir, otherwise I can't write." And I go, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that you could write like on a color of paper, which maybe yes, maybe the contrast isn't is a little bit too bright for you, but maybe if I got you this, then it would work. But you know, by that point, it's fully ingrained. It's part of their persona, even as a send learner, as not as a send learner, but as a child with a send need, like send need, but as a child with that diagnosis, like it's part of them, and they're so vehemently attached to it that actually now I'm gonna be in trouble here because like if I don't give them that, knowing full well that they're not going to be able to, they'll be able to access with whatever, then what's going to happen is that child doesn't feel included and won't feel like the access is available for them in that classroom. It's quite interesting,
mm,
and like some of these strategies literally put them on self-fulfilling pathways to the end. I don't know how you overcome that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know whether it's the language that we use with students when it first comes to trying certain strategies with them. Like we won't have this forever. Like we need the etc. Do you know what I mean? I think often kids will grab onto it because it's also a safety blanket as well. And
yeah.
that's where the cold-hearted scientist in me thaws and just goes to jelly and goes, "It's your safety blanket. Just have some blue paper, mate. Yeah, I'll go find some from the prep room right now." Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, or just like if it means that you're going to do the first 5 starter questions and we're going to get like a full lesson's worth of like focus out of you, I'll just go get some bloody blue paper because you need that right now. Do you know what I mean? And so that's where like that's what I find really heartbreaking and really difficult. Like, I don't know whether it's because of initial approaches to send, and quite often, like it'll be someone in the past, someone not currently in their space who's set them off on that pathway, and they've held onto that safety blanket, and now. And what is the right way of pulling
Well,
that
that's
out
what I was going to ask,
from them?
interestingly, was you might do that at the
Yeah,
start. Would you ever challenge it, do you think? Would you build a relationship with that person, have that
you'd have
discussion?
to, wouldn't
Yeah.
you? You'd have to. What happens when you go out into university and like,
Oh, I
because,
bet it carries on.
and do you know what I mean? Well, that's the thing. But in the end, you're going to end up finding yourself in a place where that's very specific access need that has now become your safety blanket, which isn't necessarily helping you, but it's become a placebo for you. It becomes your personal barrier at that point because there's no way of resolving it, and maybe what could have happened is you could have learned to diversify your coping strategies a little bit earlier and been taught. Let's face it, because no one, like, you taught it. You don't, not many people, not many novices learn stuff
Mm.
themselves. Do you know what I mean? Like, and this is a taught thing, and maybe we should have taught people to diversify their strategies initially, so that, like, when they come across those barriers, they're not so rigid in and can flexibly overcome, and are a little bit more resilient in the face of a barrier. Do you know what I mean? Like, because it's difficult, isn't it? Like timeout passes is a classic thing, isn't it? Like, and they have got some evidence behind them, like brain breaks and things like that, but I don't think it necessarily, in the given context of a school, the research has been shown that they have impact. I'll be intrigued to see whether there are studies that exist. All I found was like brain breaks for kids with ADHD. But if you find yourself in a position where for example, those brain breaks are not in your subset of actions that you have accessible to you at that point in time as an adult, then you're going to struggle, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? Like, you're going to absolutely struggle. And if you're taking maybe 2 to 3 to 4 brain breaks every hour, well, and you go into employment, then someone's going to struggle with that, aren't they?
At AQA, we work with the UK's largest teacher network to shape the future of assessment. With teachers for students, we ask questions today that matter tomorrow.
Teachers, have you heard of Bet UK 2026? It's the world's biggest education and technology event, and it's completely free for educators. From keynote speakers and panel sessions to CPD accredited workshops and networking, Bet UK 2026 is where educators from across the globe come together to share ideas, spark inspiration, and find solutions that fuel our mission to drive better education globally. Get your free ticket today at betshow.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's fascinating, isn't it? Because when I started teaching, this wasn't a thing. It wasn't something anyone talked about. It wasn't something that was on the radar at all, right? And then it seems to have over time gone a little bit full circle almost. So I think there was a time when, yes, everyone needs to have whatever break they want. And then more recently, I've seen more commonly things like, why don't the whole class get up and do something? So rather than it just being one or two looking different, but actually, if we've all done some really, I don't know, something that required quite a lot of brain power, shall we say? Like everyone getting up and doing a lap of the track, or everyone getting up and just
Yeah.
doing a bit of a stretch or a movement kind of break, and then getting back down and actually getting more out of kids as a result of it. And I actually then go, but sometimes when I sit there for an hour, in like CPD or inset days and things,
Yeah.
I might fancy getting up and going to the toilet. And then I kind of can't really blame the kids because there is only so long I can sit and take in new information without needing a bit of a break for myself. And actually, whilst 4 times in an hour probably is pushing it a little bit, that what we expect children to take in and the level of new information, and they are better at it because they're more sponge-like in their kind of brain things, and way of working, um, is quite high, isn't it? And I don't know, like
Yeah.
I think there is something that says maybe there is a kind of midway point here that actually we recognise that whereas once I'd have said, "Oh no, only one or two," now I'm a bit like, actually, do you know what? If everyone just got 5 minutes just to stretch their legs and go for a wander, that probably is helpful. But then ironically, I probably wouldn't say the same about fidget toys.
Yeah, but also you got to be careful because, like, look, some people with ADHD, like really benefit from
Mm,
hyperfocus, and so when they get into like a task, a 5 minute break for them, which is enforced, might be a
mm,
nightmare because they know I'm in this period of hyperfocus, I'm actually succeeding, and now Miss is going to break me off from that. So it's quite
yeah.
a see once again. This is the nuance that we have to think about with these strategies. Do you know what I mean? I think also one of the things I find quite a lot is it's just one of those things. You know, I've fallen down the rabbit hole and I've managed to kind of look at these things. I've been thinking about it for a while, but and you just don't have time unless you're a nerd like me. Do you know what I mean? I do these things in um, at midnight when I'm sat in bed and I'm going like, right, well, give me insight into dyslexia. What is it? Is it just one condition? No, it's a host of conditions. Give me insight into ADHD. Blah 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 blah. And like as teachers, I just don't know whether there's enough information accessible, readily available, whether there's time offered to it in terms of learning about the spate of these conditions, because obviously all of these conditions have their own nuances
Mm,
as well. Like for example, like ADHD is not just one form, right? Dyslexia is not just one form. However, for shortcuts, for mental shortcuts, because teachers often are given CPD on day one and day two, maybe by the SENCO about SEND need, and then go off into teaching, and the odd person will get really involved in it, and the rest of the people will go, okay, well, I'm just going to do what the SENCO told me on Monday and Tuesday at the start of September. Um, they don't have the insight into all of these conditions, and then it's really really easy to lean into the magic bullet. Do you know what I
mm,
mean? It's really really easy to say like, well, I'll give my whole class a 5 minute break now, and the poor lad who's like, oh god, if I have this 5 minute break, I'm not coming back. Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, I, I know, because this is what this is what my brain does. If I'm once I have this 5 minute break, it's all over, miss. I'm going to disrupt for the next half hour. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? Because this piece of writing is just, I'm just well into it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so this is the thing, or that person with dyslexia who's like, I don't know how to decode that phonic, and no level of Comic Sans is going to help me here. Right? Do you know what I mean? Like, so
I can promise you there
you
is no
can say,
research that Comic Sans does anything except annoy me.
but you can change, like you can change the font all you want, you can change the letter spacing, etc. I just don't know that phonic, or I'm just decoding it wrong
Mm,
every time, and so I just need some more practice when it comes to that, like little grapheme. That like it's just, do you know what I mean? But I think like what's interesting is like we're I think it, like you say, we're going a little bit kind of we're going into a new phase, I think, of Send. Given like
mm,
if we follow the EF guidance, I think we're going into a new phase of Send practice, which is good. I like it. Do you know what I mean? Which is thinking about the teaching, etc. But I don't know whether the EF guidance. I mean, it does say actually in the report, it says train your
mhm.
teachers in with to have an understanding of each of these conditions, like an in-depth understanding of these conditions. But once again, like that's a time factor, do you know what I mean? And a fancy inclusion profile with some easy to deliver strategies is great to, number one, give to a teacher who is really short on time to go out and learn about these conditions. Number two, really easy to show to external variopayer that you're doing something for inclusion. Um, and number three, really, it feels really nice for each of the kids, even though it might not be helping them. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's quite an interesting. It's quite an interesting position to be in, and then sometimes it becomes the thing that helps that child get through the 5 years of school. Give fidget toys. It's like some kids. They're just like, "Yeah, I've got my fidget toy. I can sit in lessons now. I don't have to go wandering around the school all day." And you go, "Oh no," but it just causes absolute disruption in the lesson. But do you know what I mean? And if it causes, I'm not going to lie to you, Claire, just for the sake of everyone else, if it causes disruption, then I'm not going to. It's not tolerable. It's not. That's
No,
not
if you
inclusive.
are
That's not.
disrupting other people's learning, then
Yeah.
ultimately that you can't have one person needs being met for 29 others who then
Yeah.
can't learn as a result. So yeah,
Yeah, that's not
yeah,
inclusive. That's the very. Do you know what I mean? Like that's exclusive.
yeah.
Like it's very opposite of inclusive. But like maybe a child sat there flicking a fidget spinner underneath the desk, and you're like, oh no, like I know that's not helping, but I know that's what's getting you to sit here in the lesson. But then, like you say, is it learned helplessness? What do we do? How do we remove that? And I guess the EF also says that. Do you know
Mm.
what I mean? Remove those supports and scaffolds, so that and we're always looking with a view to remove those supports and scaffolds. I think we're on a bit of a. I feel like in schools with this new guidance, with like the things like the 5 a day and stuff like that. I feel like we're on a bit of a turning point for it, but also it's a hard sell, isn't it? Like think about Martin. Did you read Martin Oliver's speech at the
Yeah.
weekend?
Well, I
That
was
was
gonna
really
I was
interesting,
gonna go
wasn't it?
into that. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, because I was like, because I'm not gonna lie to you, like initially before he made that speech, I was like, oh God, this could go one way or the other, right? Uh, and I worked in schools like 15 years ago, where like essentially we were quite loose on the standards in the classroom and like send kids. It was quite easy, not send kids, sorry, kids with send needs, with special education needs. They could come into a classroom and the space would be full of like talk which wasn't relevant, um, things that weren't relevant, PowerPoints that had information which wasn't relevant to the learning, just loads of distractions. And I would now rate it as like one of the least inclusive spaces I've ever seen. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Because if you're a child with ADHD or ASD, and the lesson used to change every lesson so that you kept it engaging, people would go, "Oh, your lessons are getting a bit boring now. I'd mix it up and change it up. I'd do this at the start, then and this, that, and then the other." Do you know what I mean? And and to be honest with you, being probably, I can imagine being someone with autism spectrum disorder and not knowing what classroom you were going to go into on that day. Oh my God, am I going to have to talk in a group as part of like this group presentation, which Sir's asked me to do for the last 4 lessons? And how is this lesson going to start? Is he going to start with that, that hot seating thing that he gets people to do? And like, I can imagine it was a horrible environment to be in, and I was really worried we were slipping back to that. I'm not going to lie to you, Claire. Prior to Martin Oliver's speech, but actually some of the things that he said this weekend reassured me that some of the high standards which do secure inclusion for all in the classroom, like classrooms which are calm and orderly and routined, I'm glad that those aren't going out with the bathwater.
Yeah, I think it's probably for me less about what he said, but more around how inclusion is going to be at the heart of every area of the inspection. And I don't know, I'm aware of two kind of colleagues in schools quite locally who've had kind of trials of the new framework. So they're not due in the
Yeah,
next year, so they were approached. They're both kind of good schools in old language. And the kind of overwhelming um, I don't know if concern's the right word, but feedback then that they gave was that because it was so focused on the disadvantaged, the SEND, the EAL, people who are lack or PLAC, that every conversation, whether it was data, whether it was curriculum, whatever assessment, you name it, was talking about these groups of children. And they kind of sometimes the leaders want to say, yeah, I'll happily talk to you about those 6 children in that group. Because in a primary school, sometimes that's how many we're talking about in one of those groups.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
can we also talk about the 297 others? Like that, the kind of focus so much on if we get it right for these children, we're getting it right for all, that actually goes, sometimes what we do for those children looks different. And we can make good progress, but that looks different for those children. But let's not forget that our school is also high and large majority, you know,
Really
90 to 95% of most schools not in that group. And this is not to take away from the need for schools to be inclusive and do things right. But ultimately, if we did have a little bit more funding, we'd probably be able to do that even better. Um, but that actually we mustn't lose track of those who aren't disadvantaged or those who haven't got SEND in the
Yeah.
midst of all of this. And I guess I'm slightly hesitant that the overemphasis, you know, not got a problem with inclusion being its own kind of area to look at, but in every single area of the framework, it's in order to be meeting the expected standard, you've got to show how you're getting your inclusion right in this one too. And for all of these different groups, with all of these different evidence strands.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one because look, if it becomes exclusive for those pupils, then you've done exactly the opposite, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? Like, so there's so much focus on those pupils that like the school has become exclusive for them. Do you know what I mean? And when I say exclusive, I don't mean excluding them. It has simply but if you look at it depends what you're using as the framework for strategies for inclusion. Do you know what I mean? If we're looking at tailoring of every environment for the kind of for the bullet solutions, you know, the magic bullet solutions, well, yeah, your school's going to become exclusive. It
Mm.
is, isn't it? If that's the way we frame that discussion. But let's face it, right? I always say this. I say, like, look, probably a space like my classrooms are silent, and that's because I've got a commitment for inclusion. Do you know what I mean? I've got a commitment for inclusion because a silent space means someone with with ADHD has not got the distraction there and the noise behind them to get distracted. Someone with ASD, they can fully focus and concentrate in the space I'm in because essentially they know they can rely on it to be like that. And I have kids that say that to me. Do you know what I mean? I have kids that go, I like the fact that there's no disruption in your class, sir, because no one talks. And that's one of the, and I sound like a monster, right? But when kids come into my classroom, I say, don't talk unless they ask you to. That's it for the whole hour. Don't talk until I ask you to. And it sounds horrific, doesn't it? It sounds like I'm an authoritarian, but that is weird. The reason why I do that is for inclusion in mind. Do you know what I mean? Because when kids talk during the first activity, what happens is we create this ripple effect. There's no kid can be sat next to the smartest kid in the class, can they? Not every kid can be sat next to the smartest kid in the class. Yeah, but one kid can, and then that one kid becomes the person who gets like some good talk around those questions, maybe just gets the answers, and so gets some sort of exclusivity in terms of the classroom. But if it's silence, it doesn't matter who you sit next to, just come in and sit down and have a go at this. Do you know what I mean? And so if we frame it like that around, and the EEF says it, isn't it? Like, do you know what I mean? Really structured, routine learning environments, explicit instruction where kids aren't relying on, we're not relying on kids discovering it for themselves. That's like one, that's number one in the 5 a day, explicit instruction using like Rosenshine's principles. And if we're justifying on those lines rather than magic bullet solutions of like, oh, well, you know, that child needs the blue overlay, and so we've got him that, blah, blah, blah. If we're going down that line, then I don't think it's a bad thing. Do you know what I mean? I don't think if everyone is singing from that hymn sheet, the danger is everyone's not going to sing from that hymn sheet.
So let me throw a slightly different thought at you, because I don't disagree with what you're saying. So let's try and see if I can. What's your perspective on sensory learning environments and what classroom learning environments could and should look like? Because this is big in primary, certainly. And it's something that I've done a fair bit of work on over the last few years in terms of classrooms in my school. What they look like. Now, it's not to say every classroom looks the same, because it absolutely doesn't, but just taking out some of that cognitive overload, trying to reduce the amount of kind of information that might overwhelm and clutter, just thinking about purposeful design of spaces, not just for SEND, but knowing that when we do this and get it right, it will support our SEND pupils.
Yeah, look, if so I think personally we learn what we attend to, right? But I don't think personally, I know personally we learn what we attend to. That's what all the evidence points to. And if we're attending to classroom displays, then we're not attending to the information on the screen. And some of us struggle to attend more than others due to needs. Do you know what I mean? And so in my mind, just reduce that distraction. If you need a piece, the other thing is to have to whip round the room and look for a piece of information which might be instructional or like vital to your learning. I don't think it's fair. Like now I've got to find that vocabulary list on the wall. It should be in front of me. It should be, or it should be written on the board where I was attending to initially. I shouldn't have to look around the room. Do you know what I mean? It's akin to like hiding a trail of breadcrumbs for that person, and there's loads of distractions on the way to the breadcrumbs. I personally think like those learning environments should be as focused on what you want them to learn as possible. Generally, a screen at the front of the school, at the front of the classroom, and minimal distraction around, because it's really easy to get lost in that person's drawing of a leaf,
Mm.
isn't it? If if you're that way inclined, and then 20 minutes pass by, and Miss has just been practicing like how to pronounce ph, um, and giving you a load of examples on how to pronounce ph, and how non-examples on how to pronounce ph, and you just missed all of it because you're just looking at that, like, the Billy's picture of a leaf on the wall, and like it was a beautiful display, and like this parents really liked it, but in the end that's suddenly become the thing that stopped you from learning that phonics. That's where I stand on that. I just the less the better. And let's face it, if it's a tool for learning, it should be in front of you. Like that's it. Otherwise, you are going to end up following the breadcrumbs and maybe following the cake crumbs instead. Shall I
Yeah,
do
you go
the
for
ad
it.
reads? Okay. This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit www.hachetteLearning.com to explore the full range of titles. We know teachers are the real experts in the classroom. That's why they work closely with teachers like you, combining your insight with their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training, and guidance that genuinely makes a difference. They're the UK's most chosen assessment organisation, so chances are you already know their work. As we head into the new school year, AQA are focused on helping teachers feel supported and ready. If you want to find out more about how they're working with teachers like you, just head to their website or search AQA. We work with experts. Yeah, so that's my perspective on learning environments.
Ah, it's hard, Beejesh, when we're on the same page. I think where we're probably landing with it is we want to be evidence informed, and we want to get, ultimately all staff want to get everything right for children in their classes with a whole variety of different special educational needs. And we start with that research informed, and we start with that perspective that actually, when we know the children well, we know that there are some, quality first teaching, as was once called, don't know if that's back or not, approaches
Mm.
that we can do that mean that the vast majority are going to be successful. There's some children with specific needs that we can do particular adjustments for that make the difference. And then there's others that we have to kind of be making that call of, is this going to is this going to help? Is it going to hinder? Is it going to be genuine? Is it not? And when is it right to push back and pick your battles in terms of what that looks like? And when is it right to just go, if that's going to help you in this moment to access this learning, even if there perhaps isn't the strongest evidence base, that's perhaps still the right thing to do right now.
Yeah, but what's important is I think the nuanced approach, and we don't all just lose our heads over inclusion because Ofsted are looking for it now, and then do some crazy stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like when when Ofsted started looking for AFL, and we all did crazy stuff for AFL. I think that's really, really important, and to look towards like the EEF. I mean, but luckily the EEF
Yeah,
exists. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And luckily
true.
it still holds the water that it has held for the last kind of 10 years. Like people are looking to it and going, yeah, this is right. This evidence, this is what the evidence says, and luckily the EEF aren't talking about anything mad and kind of like magic
Yeah,
bullety when it comes to inclusion. You know, they're just talking about those five things. Um, like, and you can, if I think you don't have to lose your head, I think, as a school lead when it comes to it, because in the end, like if your classroom, because that's the key, isn't it? That's maybe when it comes to it, what I'm listening to, because it's really interesting to get your insight onto this, because obviously you got the school wide perspective, Claire. But like what I'm hearing is, as long as we don't tip into exclusivity due
mm,
to the inspection frame, which is then forced by the inspection framework, which then leads to like a whole swathe of like just non-evidence informed practice popping up left, right, and centre in various places, so that we do the window dressing
yeah,
for Ofsted rather than the actual work. I think that's a real, when it comes to leadership, I think that's probably something that we need in mind.
yeah.
Got that
I think
right?
that's vital that you don't just want to do something so that you can say you're doing something, that you're doing it
Yeah.
because it's the right thing to do for the children in front of you as a class, that you are meeting individuals' need, but also you're constantly assessing what that looks like across the class and what that looks like across the school ultimately as well. um yeah, it's not just so that you can say I've done X, box ticked, move on, because very rarely
Yeah,
does that
yeah, yeah.
actually lead to meaningful and purposeful progress.
Yeah, no, look. If anything, then I have to do like a fair bit of intentionalism when it comes to
Yeah, being
intentionalism. Is that
intentional. Yeah, I know what you
doing?
mean.
Yeah, there's a fair bit of intentionalism when it comes to my practice. Do you know what I mean? As well, like if if I got a silent classroom, I've got to just justify why it's silent. Do you know what I mean? If um if I've chosen to use blank canvas instruction, then why am I using blank canvas instruction? Like, because I'm not going to use a PowerPoint which like overloads the screen with information, because actually it is the most inclusive way to deliver content.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean? There's nothing distracting on my page. Like, so if it leads to an added level of intentionalism, because that's one of my qualms with teaching. I think quite often we learn how to teach, and then often habits become internalized without a great deal of intentionalism, and then we end up because and you might accidentally get the cohort of kids in front of you that just do it that year, and you go, oh, that worked, and then like essentially you take that forward, and then you teach it to someone else, and then the kind of like intentionality in the teaching like just fritters away, and instead of being like we're not, instead of being practitioners, with performers.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
And then Ofsted come and
Yeah.
promote that when they when they rank something outstanding last, like not anymore obviously, but when they ranked teachers outstanding
Yes.
because they saw performance, and maybe they then believe themselves that that performance is correct.
Oh
Do you
yeah,
know what
and
I mean?
that's
Like,
that's the
so I feel like,
danger, is we go back to that.
yeah.
Once the new framework comes out, it'll take one or two schools to have got exemplary in send or in
Mm,
inclusion, and everyone go, right, what are they doing? Because that's what I need to be doing.
yeah.
And that's, I guess, where I sit in the slight worry right now. And sometimes I just kind of shut down to it a little bit and go, right, do I know that what I'm doing is right for the children and staff in my school? If so, fine. And I hold myself accountable to standing by that and being firm and not being kind of dragged into the massive emails that will come for people wanting to sell me strategies and solutions and ways of doing it that means I'll be Ofsted exemplary.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a whole industry popped up
Mm,
around this, and there is. Do you know what I mean? And with Send as well,
mm.
there's a whole industry around it, which is, and shame on those people. I'm not gonna lie. Some of them help, but like realistically, like selling snake oil is not a good thing.
Oh
Do you
yeah,
know what
well,
I
60 quid
mean?
to someone to tell me about the framework when I could just go on for free and watch the YouTube channel of Ofsted telling me directly from them. That's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Shame,
Yeah.
a shame. There's taxpayers' money we pay for it as well. So we need the civic responsibility to do the right thing. Um, We'll
I
end on
think
that
so.
one. Because it's 9 o'clock. Right, we're going to leave it on this. We don't know when we're back, do we,
No,
Claire?
we may be back next month. If not, we may have a little pause for a little bit.
Yeah. But just watch this space. If you really want us back, then let us know. It's nice to know that we want it. But yeah, tune into all the other amazing TTR shows out there, and don't forget to get your tickets for the TTR national event in March, which is coming up. It is a great event if you're in Manchester, and if you're not in Manchester, then travel there because it was wicked. It was a brilliant day out. So yeah, and we'll see you
Yeah,
soon,
absolutely.
Claire.
Take care. Good to chat.
Good luck with all your
Cheers.
busyness.
All right.
All
Thanks, then. Bye.
right. See you later. Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.